Dr. Bill Crawford here, psychologist, speaker, author of 8 books, host of 2 PBS specials, here again to bring you another tip on how to help you create the life you want. Specifically, how to use my life from the top of the mind philosophy to bring more clarity, confidence, creativity into everything you do. Today, I want to look at how we can bring more clarity, confidence, and creativity into these discussions that turn into arguments. So the first thing I think we want to do is to make a distinction between a discussion and an argument. Of course, discussion is where you're really talking to someone. You may have a different opinion than they do, and yet each of you are listening to each other, wanting to understand and trying to find some common ground. There's a purpose there other than just debating about who's right. An argument can really get into us trying to convince them that we are right. They're trying to convince us that they are right, and nobody's really listening to anybody. For those of you who follow my life from the top of the mind philosophy, I call this banging brain stems. We're both in this lower 20% of the brain. Nobody's listening to anybody, and it's just this defensive or offensive perspective. So what I think we want to do is come from this upper 80% of the brains. The neocortex, I call it the top of the mind. And this is where we are going into a situation where someone may be wanting to argue with us, but we're centered and we're focused and we're clear that an argument isn't what I want to create or sustain. So one of the things you can do, if you see someone trying to argue with you or trying to convince you that they are right and you're wrong, I would simply first start by asking a question. So, okay, you can say, I'm just curious. Are you wanting to understand my perspective, or are you wanting to convince me that I'm wrong? I think you're going to find a stunned silence on the end of that, because clearly they're wanting to convince you that they're wrong, but I'm going to have a hard time admitting to that because they know it's really probably not a good idea. Well, I'm just trying to convince you of the facts here, blah, 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 blah. You go, oh, okay, fine. So let's kind of get a sense that we may have a different perspective here. And let's assume I'm not trying to convince you that you're wrong. You're not trying to convince me that I'm wrong. Maybe, or what are we trying to do here? What's our goal? And again, see, that's a good question, because it's going to have them going to what I call, that's a neocortex question. It's a question about the solution in the future. What's our goal? Where are we going here? What are we trying to accomplish? And it's really all about kind of hopefully combining what's wrong, what's important to them with what's important to us. Now, if you're just dealing with someone who all they want to do is argue with you in order to convince you that you are wrong, I would not engage that. What we've done in the past, I'm concerned with, is when someone tells us we're wrong or tells us how stupid we are, or tells us what opinion is, we have a tendency to want to defend that position. We have a tendency, well, blah, 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 but we kind of say what we believe, thinking that they're looking to understand. But remember, they're not looking to understand, they're looking to convince us that we are wrong. And therefore, they're not going to hear our perspective as good information other than something they can attack. So they're looking for a weakness in our argument or our position, and they want to attack that. So what I would do, once you have a clear position on a situation, and you've come to this position with some thoughts, some understanding, you're very comfortable with this position. This is a position that you would actually teach or recommend to someone you love. If someone comes at you and you just get really clear that they're just wanting to argue with you, I would encourage you to say something like this. Okay, well, I can understand how you'd see it that way, and I'm really comfortable with my position. Well, of course, you're blah, 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 it's a bad decision, blah, blah, blah. I can't believe you think that, but what you need to do is change because of blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I can see how you see it that way, and I really feel good about the decision and the position I've come to. Well, of course you do, because you're not blah, blah, and you're ditty bitty, and you're terrible, and you're a horrible person, and blah, 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 and you're wrong, and you're bad, and you blah, 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 and you go, yeah, I can understand your perspective on this, and I'm really comfortable with my decision and my perspective. See, here's what you're doing. You're not giving them anything to argue with. You're not giving them anything to counter. You're not giving them any information that they can then attack. You're basically saying the same thing over and over, which basically says, I'm not going to argue with you. But you're not saying that, because that's going to come across as telling them they're wrong. And this isn't about telling them they're wrong any more than it's about letting them tell us we're wrong. Now, what this requires is that you come from this upper 80% of the brain, this clear, confident, creative part of the brain. You're centered, you're focused, you're clear about the value of your perspective. It is a perspective you would teach or recommend to someone you love, and you don't need to convince this person that they are wrong and that they need to agree with you in order to feel good about what you agree and what you feel and what you have come to decide. This is a perspective of confidence. And it allows us to be creative in a situation because we're not trying to convince this other person. We're just trying to create a communication that really keeps an argument from progressing. Because after a while, once you say, you know, I can understand how you see it this way, I'm just really comfortable with my perspective, they're going to say, well, is that all you can say? You go, yeah, it is. But notice I'm not saying, yeah, it is. Blah, 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 blah. I'm going, yeah, it is. Now, of course, some people would say, well, wait a minute. What if I can't understand? What if whatever they're saying is not making any sense? How can I tell them I understand that? Well, this is where the brain science comes in. When someone is coming from this lower brain and they're trying to convince you that you're wrong and they're argumentative and they're demanding and they're not listening and they're just being irrational, right? Well, they're saying things that don't make sense. What we need to understand is they're coming from the part of the brain that doesn't make sense. See, this lower brainstem stuff, this is where we get into fight or flight, but it's not the part of the brain that is rational and makes sense. So when somebody is saying something that's irrational, or when they're being irrational, they're coming from the irrational brain, which means we can understand why it wouldn't make any sense. So it's going to be very authentic for us to say, you know, I can see how you'd see it that way, and I'm just really comfortable with my perspective. Now, there's a word here that's really important. I'm not saying, yeah, I can understand what you're saying, but I'm really, see that word but really gets in the way of what we're talking about. Yeah, I can understand how you'd see it that way. And, you know, I'm really comfortable with my perspective. And allows us to have a perspective without needing to change theirs. And that's the way you find yourself not arguing with someone that you don't really want to argue with. Frankly, as you've heard, I don't believe arguments are very productive in the first place. So I would say just don't argue. However, certainly don't argue with someone who isn't really wanting to understand your perspective or wanting to create some sort of common ground. So asking that question, so I'm just curious, are you really wanting to understand my perspective, or you're wanting to convince me that I'm wrong? Is sometimes a great question to ask, and you can watch them kind of dance around that. And once you get really clear that they're basically just trying to convince you that you're wrong, rather than trying to convince them that they're wrong or that they shouldn't be doing that, saying that, you know, I can understand how you'd see it that way, and I'm really comfortable with my decision, my position. I think that's going to be really helpful when we are making a decision about how we engage others. We don't have to attend every argument to which we are invited. If we have decided that arguments are not something we would recommend to someone we love, we can excuse ourselves from it if we're coming from this upper 80% of the brain, if we're coming from this clear, creative, centered perspective. This is what I teach when I go around the world teaching Life from the Top of the Mind. This is what I have in my book. There's a whole section in here about how to deal with difficult people that not only keeps them from making you mad or frustrating you, but actually maybe gets them to shift from this resistant brain to the receptive brain. By the way, for those of you who wanted this on Audible, people have been asking for this for a long time. It is finally on Audible. So just go to Audible, search for Life from the Top of the Mind, and you can get that. This is what I love to do. I love to help organizations, families, starting to work with families and family businesses a lot, because, hey, have you noticed how an argument in that kind of situation can go really, really deep and cause a lot of hurt feelings? Families, family businesses, organizations, individuals around the world, I get to go and teach this philosophy. So if you would like me to come to your organization, your family, your school, your church, teach this and share this information so that everybody in the organization or the family can be coming from the top of the mind, I would be happy to do that. All you got to do is go to my website, billcrawfordphd.com, or just Google Bill Crawford, Ph.D. I'll come up on the first page. Hit the contact button. Let me know what you're interested in. Love to talk with you about that. In the meantime, if you're enjoying these videos, feel free to subscribe. I post them on YouTube and Facebook and Pinterest and LinkedIn and Twitter and iTunes, so you can subscribe in any of the social medias. I post one every week. I do have a mailing list that every week I send out one of my favorite quotes, along with 2 or 3 paragraphs about how to apply that quote to life. If you would like to receive one of these each week, it's free. Just go to my website, hit the subscribe button, put your name, email address in, and each week I will send you one of these. This is what I love to do, so I appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you. If you find it valuable, please share it with your friends. They may find it valuable as well. So in the meantime, here's to you, bringing more clarity, confidence, creativity into everything you do, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the future.